So, Lone Rider here, and I was going through my stash and I found an email that was related to the Watchung mountain bike effort. This is from 2016. But given that in Union County, and in particular at Watchung Reservation here, mountain biking is still banned by the government, I would argue this is still relevant. So it was my response to an individual on a mountain bike forum who was asking about mountain biking in Watchung Reservation and the status there and what was going on with it. So here goes. Glad you asked. This may be long, but bear with me as it is the culmination of what led to the signs coming down. I have been involved in this since 2014, though I did ride in the res as a teenager. In July of 2014, I read a Star Ledger article on some people, including Jorba, trying to get access at Watchung. In the entire article, no law or ordinance against mountain bikes was mentioned, even though removing such a ban was the focus of the entire two-page piece. Also, the article quoted county spokesman Delia as saying he had no idea why mountain biking was banned, and he never mentioned any ban either. This set off alarm bells as it didn't make sense, so I began looking for what the law actually was. In the over 200-page county code, and in parentheses, I read that and did keyword searches, and parentheses, nothing RE riding in the trails. Finally, after hitting the library, etc., I filed the first of many OPRA, Open Public Record Act requests, asking were we banned, if so, why, and what the law or ordinance was, as well as the minutes of the meeting at which it passed, any trail studies the determination to ban us was based on, etc. After nearly a month, this is what I had found out. 1. There was no law or ordinance ever passed against mountain biking. 2. The policy was created extra legally by unelected officials in a backroom deal in March of 1995. 3. It was done by the county's admission behind closed doors and without any public input. After this, the county began saying they were enforcing an old ordinance, but never said which ordinance. It later turned out the ordinance in question is part of the public safety code that regulates riding on roads and sidewalks and paths and not blocking cars. Nothing was meant to ban mountain biking, which is why the county told me, quote, the freeholders did not act, unquote, to ban mountain biking. The freeholders being the elected body, which would have to pass said ordinance. Also, although the county said back then that mountain bikes were, quote, ruining the park, they had no documentation of any trail problems. In fact, no documentation re the conditions at Watchung at the time at all. All they had was a trail study done of 2 trails in South Mountain, a park in another county, that was dated a year after the decision to ban us at Watchung. I believe the appropriate response is WTF. I asked for their trail, their proof of trail conditions at Watchung, and they sent me a post-dated study of 2 trails in another park. Exclamation point. I sent this info to the newspaper that did the original article, and initially they seemed pleased but never followed up. I then contacted Jorba, the Jersey Off-Road Bicycle Association. I also got all the riders I knew to write the county, including the local newspaper, and went around to local bike shops informing them as well. Finally, in February of 2015, myself and several other riders, along with the executive director of Jorba, met at a county golf course with several county officials and a rep of the contractor CMA Associates they hired to design a new trail plan, which I had found out about myself through OPRA request and then informed Jorba of. The trail plan was said to include mountain biking. At this meeting, it was once again made clear that there was never any law or ordinance against mountain biking in the park, as no one present ever said, hey, we can't just do this, we need to repeal law such and such. In fact, one of the county guys admitted, quote, what happened years ago was wrong, unquote. After the meeting, we were promised a vote on a trail plan would happen in several months. When no word came after many months, I contacted the county. When I didn't hear from them after a month, I called the Jorba guy. He said he'd call if he heard something, but no one, including the other rider, had heard anything, and not long ago, this past winter sometime, the Jorba guy actually emailed me to ask if I knew what was going on. Finally, figuring the whole thing was a stall tactic by the government, I resorted once more to the only thing that had seemed to work, the Open Record Act request. After I filed the latest one this past winter regarding enforcement of the ban, the signs came down shortly thereafter. I heard from John Martin over at Milburn Cyclery, who used to ride with us at my friend's shop in Scotch Plains, that it was county cops who took them down. Basically, one of the cops was a former cyclist and knew the people, and he told them and they told me. So short answer, it was never illegal, but the county policy did act as if it was in an end run around the democratic process for who knows what reason. Now they've taken the signs down, so I don't see what the obstacle is to riding there. Now, what happened since, of course, is that they made new signs and put them up, not just back up where they had been before, but at all the other county parks, arbitrarily expanding this ban, which never had any clear legislative authorization, from just about Watchung for over 20 years to all county parks. And that's the way it's been ever since 2016. Now, because the county still doesn't allow mountain biking officially, I would argue that all of these observations are still relevant. And, the history of the ban and the effort to try and get access and everything is so convoluted. I found myself having to try and explain it to somebody else the other day. I was talking to somebody yesterday, actually, about this. And he said, what do you mean you can't ride in the park? And I explained that, well, there's, you won't find any law in the books or anything on the county's website, but if you go to the park, there's signs up saying you're not allowed to bike there. And he asked me what that was about, and I explained basically that, for the last 20 years they've been telling everybody that this was illegal when it really wasn't, but they did have a policy against it. It was just not authorized by any law or ordinance or anything else except for a bunch of guys getting together in a back room, sticking their hands in the air and saying, by the power of Grayskull, bikes are banned, which a bunch of unelected people doing that behind closed doors in a secret off-the-books meeting is not how we should be making government policy about anything, whether it's something big or something small, like bike access. And like I said, since the bike access is still denied to this day under this policy, these observations are still relevant. But it is so hard to sum it up that when I found this email, even though it is, it's like 2 pages long, when I came across this old email printout, I said, you know what, this does a pretty good job of summing up the entire thing. So let me just read that. And sure enough, that's basically what happened. And I honestly have no idea why they decided to kill the planned mountain bike access, put up the new no bike signs, and expand the ban arbitrarily after 20 years of just being about Watchung to every park in the county. And no idea why they did all this. I do know that I don't think they ever changed the contract back, so presumably the contractor got paid for trail work they weren't going to have to do. I guess that's a plus for them. Not a plus for the taxpayers, not a plus for anybody who wanted fair park access, but, it's Jersey, corruption is as corruption does. But that's essentially a brief summary of the history of the Watchung mountain bike ban and the effort to overturn it. And it's as close as I can get to succinctly summing it up. And the very fact, I would argue, that it is so convoluted and so much nonsense going on. The fact that you can't just look on the books and find a clear law or ordinance that says you can't do this, and this is when it was passed, this is who voted for it, tells me that something shady's going on. None of these questions or issues would even exist if this was done in an above-board manner. Now, if it was done in an above-board manner, that wouldn't make banning mountain biking right. It would still be wrong, I think, but at least you'd have a clear way of opposing the ban. You just go and you write your freeholders and you say repeal ordinance X, Y, Z. But since this whole thing was created in a back room by people, misappropriating an old ordinance about something else, it's like, okay, how do you go about fighting secret government policy that was created in a back room by the unelected? You could write your elected representatives all you want. They might not even know what you're talking about. In fact, as I mentioned here, the county spokesman, Delia, admitted he had no idea why mountain bikes were banned. Now, either he's just a really bad spokesman, number one, or number two, perhaps he was just, didn't want to talk about it because it would look bad. Or three, maybe he really didn't know, because that's kind of what happens when you have policy made in a secret off-the-books meeting 20 years ago. You're going to be left with a government policy that nobody can defend, explain, or rationalize, even the person whose job it is to do so, like the county spokesman. So that's that. And I would argue, by the way, that if the county spokesman is incapable of telling you the reason for a government policy that forbids you from doing something, then you shouldn't be forbidden for doing that, right? If they can't come up with a damn good reason for saying you're not allowed to do this, then you should be allowed to do it. Lone Rider out.